It's really a great time. Well, as a Christian, I was curious about why Christmas isn't just a Christian holiday. In other words, if you're not a Christian, why observe a holiday centered around the birth of Jesus? I kind of felt confused and frustrated, as if our culture had absconded some sacred Christian holiday and was exploiting it by making it so commercialized. Well, then I found out the truth. And that's what I'm going to talk about today in this lesson, the truth about Christmas. Well, as you now know, the Christian church was born in Israel. But within a few centuries, its headquarters became centered in Rome and Constantinople, a northern shift. Then Christianity began to spread throughout Europe. As it moved north, winter became a factor. Winter in the northern hemisphere is cold, dark, and long. And in order to cope with this long and dreary season, many European civilizations developed winter festivals. You know, a reason to bust out of the house and get together with other people instead of being cooped up, share some food, maybe share and enjoy a glass of wine. Well, not all winter festivals were celebrated in December, but typically between early November and early January. Now, the Roman calendar is what we go by now, celebrating the new year on January 1st. But hundreds of centuries ago, there were many occasions to mark a new year, such as when the harvest was in and the farmers had more leisure time, or when the winter solstice began and daylight once again began to lengthen. Well, the most notable of all the winter festivals was the Roman festival of Saturnalia. Saturnalia began roughly 2 centuries before the birth of Jesus. It was kind of an agricultural harvest festival. The Roman god Saturn was viewed as an agricultural god, and every December 17th, a sacrifice was offered to Saturn in the Roman Forum. Of course, if you're going to go to the Roman Forum for a festival, there would be plenty of feasting and partying. This event lasted anywhere from 3 to 7 days. It was a national holiday and nobody worked. People decorated their houses with laurels, green trees, and shrubs that were illuminated by candles and lamps. People had parties with lots of food and drinks. People exchanged small gifts, such as candles and clay dolls and wax fruit. It all sounds pretty familiar, doesn't it? Of course, this festival also gained a reputation as being an excuse for bad behavior, given the excessive amount of partying that went on. Well, here's the thing. Once the idea of a birthday celebration for Jesus took hold, it encountered and eventually commingled with already established festivals, like the Saturnalia festival. So how did Christmas finally get started? The answer is slowly. It took a while for the early church to even acknowledge the birth of Jesus. The Apostle Paul's only reference to the birth of Jesus is in the book of Galatians. Instead, the early church was an Easter-centered religion. The death and resurrection of Jesus were at the center of the early Christian message. Not only did the early church give Jesus' birthday minimal attention, the fact is that the early church had no idea the month or the date it had occurred. This begs the question, how did the church land on the date of December 25th as the day to celebrate the birth of Jesus? Well, here is the story. Sometime around the end of the 2nd century AD, no one knows exactly when, the Eastern Orthodox Church initiated a feast day on January 6th called Epiphany. The origin of this feast is sketchy. We just don't know a lot about it. And to a great extent, scholars are just making educated guesses as to when it comes to the beginnings of Epiphany. But it does have a tie to the beginnings of Christmas, and that's why I'm talking about it. The word Epiphany is a Greek word, and it means manifestation or showing forth. In this context, it is referring to how Jesus was revealed or made manifest to the world as the Son of God. Now, various epiphanies about Jesus could be included in this idea, such as his baptism when the Holy Spirit descended on Jesus and God declared him to be his son, which is something that I'm going to talk about in the next lesson. Or when Jesus performed miracles, such as turning the water into wine at the wedding at Cana, or the feeding of the 5,000 or the 4,000. Also included as an epiphany is the Magi story I told you about in the last lesson. Because their presence and the fact that they brought Jesus the kingly array of presents symbolizes the world's recognition of Jesus as the Son of God. By the 3rd century AD, the Festival of Epiphany had become a widely observed day among the Eastern Orthodox churches, Christians. And by the 4th century, the Nativity story, the miracle of the birth of Jesus, had become an increasingly central theme to the idea of the Epiphany celebration. Well, the Roman Catholic Church did not start observing the birth of Jesus until sometime in the 4th century AD. There is some indication that the celebration of his birth began during the reign of Constantine, or shortly thereafter. There exists a calendar from 354 AD that lists the date of the birth of Jesus as December 25th. There is no explanation as to why that date was chosen for the calendar, but it must have had something to do with the festivals that were already taking place. Well, that led scholars to believe that in some way, Christmas on the 25th of December was an effort to compete with rival Roman religions, or as a way to co-opt winter celebrations to help spread Christianity, and even to baptize the winter festivals with a Christian meaning. So by 354 AD, or shortly thereafter, the Catholic Church recognized the date of Jesus' birth as December 25th. Of course, this date then became fixed, and the Eastern Orthodox Church felt pressure to adopt it as the official date of Jesus' birth. And they agreed to do that, but only if the Catholic Church would adopt the Epiphany celebration on January 6th. In 567 AD, the Council of Trent proclaimed that the entire period between Christmas and Epiphany should be considered a celebration, creating what we now know as the 12 days of Christmas. Hey, now you know the rest of that story. Well, after this, Christians gradually added this period of time called Advent. Advent is a time of spiritual preparation leading up to Christmas. For Catholics and Protestants, Advent begins on the Sunday closest to November 30th and extends up to and includes the day before Christmas. Okay, so I covered how the early church came up with a date for Christmas. It is kind of sad to think that we don't actually know the date of Jesus' birth, but on the other hand, I think it's good that a date was fixed so that we can celebrate his birth every year. The next question is this: how did Christmas morph into what it is today? Well, one way to think about it is to think of Christmas as a snowball. And as Christmas has continued to roll through all the ages, a lot of things have become a part of this massive event that we now call Christmas. And there are lots of traditions that we can talk about, but I'm going to focus on two: the Christmas tree and the story of St. Nicholas, also known as Santa Claus. Now, Germany generally gets the credit for introducing the tree to the Christmas scene. The first recorded mention of a public Christmas tree is in Bremen, Germany in 1570 and Basel in 1597. Various accounts in the 1600s describe trees in homes. By the 1800s, the German nobility had embraced Christmas trees, and since royal families promoted intermarriage as a way of cementing diplomatic relations, German nobility brought Christmas trees into their new homes. Well, in the early 1800s, there were scattered indications of Christmas trees in the U.S. By the 1840s and 1850s, the number of Christmas trees in homes had begun to explode. At the turn of the century, Christmas trees could be found in nearly every home and in the White House too. Large public trees started showing up at the same time. The first national tree appeared on the south lawn of the White House in 1923, and the first tree at Rockefeller Center appeared in 1933. So there you have it. There's a short history of the Christmas tree tradition. So now let's talk about Santa Claus. The big inclusion into the Christmas celebration came in the form of a downgraded saint who morphed into a tiny present-giving elf. I am, of course, talking about St. Nicholas and his cultural counterpart, Santa Claus. St. Nicholas probably was a real person, but we know very little about him. Despite that, he has become one of the most beloved saints in the history of Christianity, with endless stories told about him. This Catholic encyclopedia entry about Nicholas captures the legend about him, so I'm going to read it to you. Though he is one of the most popular saints in the Greek as well as the Latin Church, there is scarcely anything historically certain about him, except for that he was the bishop of Myra in the 4th century. Some of the main points in his legend are as follows. He was born in Patara, a city in Lycia in Asia Minor. In his youth, he made a pilgrimage to Egypt and Palestine. Shortly after his return, he became the bishop of Myra. Cast into prison during the persecution of Diocletian, he was released after the ascension of Constantine and was present at the Council of Nicaea. Well, that, folks, is it. That's it. That's all we know about him. In fact, so little is known about St. Nicholas that he was demoted in the Catholic Church, and his designated feast day is considered to be optional, along with 91 other minor saints. Some scholars have even suggested that Nicholas never existed, but really, with all the hoopla surrounding his name throughout the centuries, it does make more sense that there is some grain of truth about his existence. Many tales exist about him, but there is one best-known story that gives us a glimpse into the idea of St. Nicholas and Santa Claus as we know them today. So I'm going to tell you that story. Okay. A poor widower lived during the time of St. Nicholas, and he feared for the future of his 3 daughters. He could not provide a dowry for his daughters, and that meant they probably wouldn't find a husband, or even worse, they could be sold into slavery. Nicholas was the only child of wealthy parents, and he wanted to distribute his wealth to those in need. He learned of this poor widower's dilemma, and he wanted to help. So one evening, while everyone in the house was asleep, he dropped a bag of gold through a window of their home, allowing the oldest daughter to marry. And sometimes later, he did the same thing for the second and the third daughter. Now, when Nicholas arrived to deliver that third bag of gold, the widower was waiting, eager to learn who was the secret benefactor. Nicholas swore the father to secrecy, saying that all the thanks should go to God alone. And if you look at images of St. Nicholas from long ago, you see him holding these 3 bags of gold, balls, representing the 3 bags of gold he gave to the widower's daughters. The devotion to Nicholas spread throughout the early Christian world. And as time went by, he was often portrayed as an authority figure because his nighttime visits brought rewards to children who were good and a lump of coal to children who were bad. Well, it was in the United States where St. Nicholas morphed into Santa Claus. It all happened in New York City. There, a wealthy merchant and philanthropist got the ball rolling. His name was John Pintard, and he saw St. Nicholas as a symbol of his Dutch roots. Pintard held an annual St. Nicholas Day dinner on December 6th, beginning in 1810. The St. Nicholas snowball was starting to gain momentum. The second prominent New Yorker responsible for the creation of Santa Claus was Washington Irving. He was a popular author, and he wrote stories about St. Nicholas, saying that St. Nicholas flew over trees in a horse-pulled wagon and slid down chimneys to deliver gifts. Now, the third New Yorker to stoke the Santa Claus frenzy was Clement Clarke Moore. He is generally recognized as the author of the very famous poem, The Night Before Christmas. Clement, who was acquainted with both Pintard and Irving, wrote that poem for his children. He would recite it from memory for his family every Christmas Eve. Well, eventually, someone sent a copy of it to the Sentinel newspaper in 1823, where it was first published. It was reprinted every year, and by the 1830s, it really took off. Now, we can identify a number of firsts in Moore's famous poem. It was the first place where Santa was in a sleigh with reindeer, and it was the first to give the reindeer names. No one had any idea where the idea of the reindeer came from. No portrayal of St. Nicholas in Europe had associated him with reindeer before. Well, I know that you know this poem. In fact, literally everybody knows some part of this poem. So in the poem, St. Nicholas came with his gifts on Christmas Eve. So that poem shifts the date of St. Nicholas gift giving from December 6th to Christmas Eve. Now, also in the poem, St. Nicholas loses his bishop robes, and instead he becomes a cute, lovable little elf. Remember, it references his miniature sleigh, the 8 tiny reindeer. He was a little old driver with a droll little mouth, a right jolly elf. And this might explain how he could go up and down chimneys. Well, when Moore's poem was first published as an illustrated book, the illustration of St. Nicholas, he looked like a little scruffy leprechaun. Well, today, most illustrated children's books of this poem feature images of an adult-sized Santa. But the bottom line is that when Moore wrote The Night Before Christmas, Santa Claus had not yet appeared on the scene in his modern appearance. Well, this all happened because of a famous illustrator. Thomas Nast was an illustrator for the New Yorker magazine, and he was the first one to draw Santa's jolly face, full beard, and wide belt around his rotund waist. Nast drew images of Santa year after year for Harper's Magazine, and he continued to add many of the features of Santa that endure today. For example, he placed Santa at his North Pole headquarters. He made Santa a toy maker in his workshop. He gave Santa elves as assistant. He also gave Santa his giant ledger to record all the children's names. And he showed snacks left in homes on Christmas Eve for Santa. Well, they say that a picture is worth 1,000 words. And through his illustration, Nast substantially shaped and expanded the Santa folklore. Well, I want to share a few facts about Christmas to enlighten you on how it became such a major commercialized holiday. These are the trends that put us on the path that we are on today. Now, first, before the 19th century, gifts were not the main focus of Christmas. For most of the history of Christmas, as a celebration, the focus was on getting together and having a feast. If any money was spent at Christmas time, it was on food and beverages, not gifts. But then in the 1700s and 1800s, industrialization led to the rise of the consumer culture. Producing more goods made it important for merchants to create demand through advertising and marketing. Soon enough, merchants began to see the opportunity of using the holidays to promote gift giving, and that included Christmas. Manufactured purchase gifts began to replace the homemade gift in the late 1800s, early 1900s. So here's the bottom line, that commerce is the real influence that made Christmas the culturally dominated holiday that it is today. This is important to keep in mind, lest we think we have lost Christmas to the secular culture. Well, William Waits, the author of the book, The Modern Christmas in America, writes this about Christmas. Quote, "Religion has not played an important role in the emergence of the modern form of the celebration. This may come as a surprise, even a shock to those who think of Christmas as being predominantly religious. However, in practice, the secular aspects of the celebration, such as gift giving, the Christmas dinner, and the gathering of family members, have dwarfed its religious aspects in resources spent and in concern given." I think that is very well said indeed, and explains where we are today with Christmas. I mean, every year we wrestle with Christmas. So let's stop and consider what this short review of Christmas tells us. First, Christmas was never a religious holiday solely dedicated to the birth of Jesus. Instead, it has always been a mix of religious and cultural characteristics. If you think the war on Christmas must include stomping on the cultural aspects of this holiday, you are engaging in a losing battle. Non-Christians like to celebrate Christmas for the same reasons that the Romans celebrated Saturnalia. It is a festival time, a time dedicated to eating, drinking, and making merry. Christians do not have, nor have they ever had, ownership of Christmas. But if you want to make Christmas a more Christian celebration for you and your family, you might consider making and taking a Christmas pledge next time at Christmas time. Make a list of what you think is important to focus on during the Christmas season. I mean, maybe your list is about expressing your love to others in a way that does not include gift giving, or participating in Advent, to prepare your heart for Christmas Day, or examining all of your holiday activities and really analyzing how they fit into your Christian values. Perhaps it's about reaching out to people, those people who are in need, and providing the truly needy with gifts. I would also suggest joining a church and dedicating yourself to being a part of a church community. Also learning more about Jesus, as you are right now, and why he came to earth. All of these ideas and many more can make the season of Christmas a much more fulfilling time for you and your family. Christmas is a great time of year, and we all want to enjoy it. These are just some things to consider. Well, next time I start our journey of following Jesus' life as an adult. The entire second series of the Jesus Chronicles is dedicated to year 1 of Jesus' public ministry, as I said a little earlier. And we will begin with his baptism in the Jordan River, where all 3 members of the Holy Trinity make a dramatic appearance. Hey, well, don't forget to check out my website at thejesuschronicles.org, where you can download my Bible studies. And also, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. That way, you'll get notifications of when the next lesson is up. Thank you very much for listening. Merry Christmas, and we will see you soon. Shalom.